The first drone found her at the bottom of the ravine, and she laughed at it. It was a small thing, no bigger than a folded hand, a matte gray disc that dropped through the canopy on 4 whispering rotors and hung in the wet air 3 meters above her head, and it made the soft interrogative chirp of a machine confirming a kill it had not yet made. Its single lens rotated, focused, adjusted for the green gloom under the trees. It had been built by people who had never once been wrong about what happened after that chirp. The girl at the bottom of the ravine looked up at it through a curtain of dark hair plastered to her forehead by the rain, and blood ran freely from a gash above her eyebrow into her eye, and she was breathing hard from the run, and one of her boots had come apart at the sole 4 kilometers back, so that she had been running half-shod through country that 8 feet, and she looked up at the machine that had come to watch her die, and she laughed. It was not a brave laugh, or not only. It came up out of her like water out of a spring, unforced, genuine, a bright ragged sound in the dripping quiet, because the situation was, when you held it at the right distance, absurd. They had spent a fortune to bring her here. They had spent more than most worlds saw in a decade to have this exact moment, the ragged animal at the bottom of the hole with the lens turning slowly above it, and they wanted it to mean something, wanted it to be grand, and it was so small. It was a girl and a bug. She laughed at the smallness of it, and the drone recorded the laugh and sent it up through 40 kilometers of atmosphere to the ring, where a great many beings who had paid a great deal of money to watch her be afraid saw her laughing instead, and did not know what to do with their faces. Her name was Sable Vance. She was 16 standard years old. She had been born on a world the corridor's cartographers had classified, without irony, as uninhabitable, and had lived there anyway, along with her mother and her mother's people, in the narrow band of hours each day when the world permitted it. And she had come off that world knowing 3 things in her marrow that the beings watching her did not know at all. She knew that dying was a process and not an event, and that a process could be interrupted. She knew that fear was information and nothing else, a message from the body about the state of the ground, and that you read the message and you did not obey it. And she knew, most of all, that the difference between prey and predator was not strength and was not speed and was not teeth. It was which one had decided how the story ended. She had not decided yet, but she was going to. The drone chirped again, and a voice came out of it, warm and rounded and lovingly produced, the voice of a professional whose whole art was the making of moments. "There she is," the voice said in the trade tongue of the corridor, and Sable understood it because the collar they had fitted around her throat translated it directly into her skull, whether she wanted it or not. "Ladies and gentle beings and shareholders of the several classes, there she is, our little Deathworld doe, run to ground at last in the Talwood on the 4th morning of the hunt. Look at the state of her. Look at that. And you'll notice, yes, our audio is not deceiving you, you'll notice she is laughing." A pause professionally timed. "I have called 11 hunts. I have never heard one of them laugh. Remember this when the accounting is done. Remember that she laughed." "Get down here and I'll do it again," Sable said to the lens, and spat blood off her lip, and grinned at the machine with red teeth. The drone did not get down there. The drone was not the danger. The drone was the eye, and the danger was still 3 ridges east, moving through the wet forest on long, careful legs, and the eye had just told the danger exactly where she was. She stopped grinning and started climbing. The ravine wall was slick basalt, black and glassy, weeping with the night's rain, and to anything watching it must have looked like a wall a person could not climb, which was precisely why she climbed it. She had learned the wall in the first 10 seconds of falling into the ravine, learned it the way she learned all ground, as a set of holds and refusals, and she went up it now in a fast diagonal, boot and bare heel in both hands, keeping 3 points fixed and moving the 4th, never lunging, never trusting a hold she had not tested, moving with the specific unhurried speed of someone who has understood that hurry is how you die on rock. The drone climbed with her, filming, and 40 kilometers up a great audience watched a small creature go up a wall that their own bodies could not have gone up. And some of them, the honest ones, felt the first cold finger of a thing they had not paid to feel. At the lip of the ravine, she rolled into the ferns and lay flat, and did not move. She counted her own heartbeats down out of the red zone. She had a trick for it, a thing her mother had drilled into her before she was 5, a way of breathing that reached down into the panicking animal and told it to hold, and she used the trick now, 4 counts in and 7 counts out, until the roar in her ears quieted enough that she could hear the forest again. And the forest told her a great deal. It told her where the rain was heaviest and where the canopy thinned. It told her, in the sudden silence of a certain kind of small screeching thing to the east, that something large was moving there and had frightened the small things into stillness. It told her, in the drip and hush and the far-off grind of the ring's machinery that never fully left the sky of this world, exactly how much time she did not have. She had been on this world 4 days. She had learned it the way she learned everything, fast and total and without mercy toward herself, and she knew already that it was not a death world, not really, not by the standards she carried in her body. It rained too gently. Its predators were large but stupid, ambush hunters that a moving target could simply outlast. Its slopes were treacherous, but its air was rich, richer than home, so that she felt, running through the talwood, a strange surplus of oxygen, a lightness, as though the world were trying to make it easy for her and did not understand why she kept declining the offer. The beings who had built the hunt had chosen this world because it looked lethal on a survey feed, all cliffs and thorn and predators with impressive teeth, and it filmed beautifully, and it would kill a soft creature in an afternoon. It was, she had understood by the end of the first day, a stage set. A dangerous stage, but a stage. She had grown up on the real thing. She knew the difference the way a sailor knows the difference between a swimming pool and the sea. The thing that was hunting her, though, the thing was not a stage set. She had seen it twice. Once on the first evening, at a distance, silhouetted on a ridge against the bruise-colored sky, and she had thought at first it was a tree until it moved. And once yesterday, close enough to be a mistake she had barely survived, and she carried the memory of it now the way you carry a burn, present and unwilling to be ignored. It stood 4 meters at the shoulder when it chose to stand tall, though it did not often choose to, preferring to move low and folded, its long limbs bending in too many places, its body the mottled gray-green of the wet bark so that it wore the forest like a coat. It had a narrow head and no eyes that she had been able to find, and a way of turning that head that meant it was listening, or smelling, or doing some third thing her kind did not have a word for. It was fast in bursts and patient in between, and it did not tire, and it had been given her scent on the first morning, and had followed it without pause for 4 days, and it was the reason the audience had paid what they had paid. They called it a warden. She had heard the announcer say the word with relish. It was the last of its kind, or nearly, a native apex from some world the corridor had strip-mined into slag a century ago, and they kept a breeding stock for exactly this, for the hunts, and they matched one warden to one quarry, and the warden had never once in the recorded history of the hunts failed to bring its quarry down. That was the wager. That was what the 40,000 and the several classes of shareholder had put their money on. Not whether the Deathworld girl would die. That was assumed, priced in, boring. The wager was how and how well and how long she lasted and whether she screamed, and the odds moved on all of it in a market that ran without pause up on the ring, a market she was the sole and unwilling commodity of. She lay in the ferns and thought about the warden and about the market and about the collar around her throat, and she began, slowly, the way she began everything, to make a plan. The plan started with a question, because all her plans started with questions, because the man who had trained her mother, and through her mother trained Sable, had taught that the first move was never a move but a question, and the question was always the same one asked in different clothes. The question was, What do they think is true that is not? They thought she was prey. That was the first untrue thing, and the largest, and she set it aside to be used later, because a thing that large had to be used carefully or not at all. They thought the Warden could not fail. That was the second untrue thing, though she did not yet know how it was untrue, only that everything that had never failed had simply not yet met the thing that would break it, and she intended to be that thing. And they thought this was the third and the most useful, and the one she turned over now in the wet ferns with something like the beginning of a smile. They thought she was alone. She was not alone. She had 39 of them. She did not know their names, most of them. She had seen them only once, in the holding block on the ring before the drop. 40 bodies in 40 cages in a long, cold hall, and they had been a mix of species and ages and conditions. The corridors spare and unwanted swept up into the hunt's supply chain. A debtor here and a war orphan there and a political inconvenience in the third cage. And among them, scattered, 7 that she had recognized in one glance as her own kind. Deathworld humans. 3 men, 2 women, a boy younger than her, and a girl of maybe 12 with her mother's exact way of holding still. 7 humans in a hall of 40, and 32 others, and one girl who had spent her whole life learning that the only real safety anyone ever had was other people who had decided not to leave. They had dropped the 40 of them across the Talwood at dawn on the first day, spaced far apart so that they would not find one another, so that each would run alone and die alone and film beautifully doing it. One quarry, one warden, the announcer had said, and it was almost true. There was only one warden. But it was hunting all 40 in sequence, working its way through the spread like a farmer through rows. And Sable had done the arithmetic on the first night with a coldness that surprised even her. It had killed at least 6 already, that she knew of. From the announcements the collar fed her whether she wanted them or not. 6 of the 40 gone in 4 days, each death sold at premium, and the Warden coming now for her because she had lasted longest and drawn the highest odds and become, without meaning to, the main event. Which meant the Warden was not, at this moment, hunting the other 33. Which meant that, for as long as she kept it interested in her, she was the shield between it and everyone else still breathing in the Talwood. She lay in the ferns and understood, with the total clarity that came to her in the worst places, that this was not a survival problem. She had been thinking about it as a survival problem for 4 days, how to last, how to outrun and outclimb and outwait, and she saw now that survival was the wrong frame, was in fact exactly the frame they wanted her in, because a creature trying only to survive would run in a shrinking spiral until the spiral closed, and the spiral always closed. That was the whole design. The hunt could not be survived. It could only be ended. And there was only one way to end a hunt that ran on a single warden, hunting 40 quarry in sequence for a market that priced her death as its main event. You did not run from the Warden. You went and got the other 33. And then you turned the whole thing around and hunted it back. She almost laughed again, lying there at the size of the thought, at how her mother would have looked at her, that particular flat, unimpressed look that meant her mother was pleased and would rather have died than show it. 33 strangers scattered across 40 kilometers of monitored forest, most of them soft, most of them terrified, most of them already half broken by 4 days of running, and one apex predator that had never failed, and a market watching every move through 10,000 drones, and a collar around her throat that she was fairly sure could kill her the instant they decided she had become inconvenient. It was not a plan. It was barely a direction. But it pointed the right way, toward the thing instead of away from it, and every good thing she had ever done had started by pointing the right way and refusing to turn around. The drone chirped above her. It had lost her in the ferns and was hunting, quartering the ground, and its little rotors changed pitch as it dropped lower to search, and Sable watched it out of the corner of one eye without moving her head, and she thought, everything they have built to watch me is also a thing I can use. The eye that finds me is an eye I can lie to. The market that prices me is a market I can move. The collar that would kill me is a collar that first always has to translate. She reached up slow and closed her hand around the drone. It shrieked, its rotors clawing at her fingers, and she held it the way you hold a bird, firm and total, feeling the tiny motors strain. And she brought it down in front of her face and looked into its lens, so that 40 kilometers up, in 10,000 private suites and one great shareholders gallery, her face filled every screen, close and calm and streaked with blood and rain, 16 years old and entirely unafraid. "Hello," she said to all of them. "My name is Sable Vance. I want to talk to you about your investment." And then she crushed the drone in her fist and dropped the pieces in the mud and was gone into the trees before the next one arrived. And up on the ring, in the great gallery, where the several classes of shareholders sat in their tiered comfort watching the feeds, a very old and very rich being named HFY leaned forward for the first time in 11 hunts and said softly to no one, Oh, that's not right at all." The gallery on the ring was a place designed to make its occupants feel that they had already won something. It curved in tiers around a great hollow of light, and in the hollow hung the feeds, hundreds of them, floating panes of forest and rain and running bodies, and the several classes of shareholders sat in their graduated comfort and watched. The lowest tier, nearest the floor, held the small investors, beings who had scraped together the price of a single share and would spend the whole hunt anxious about it. Above them the syndicates, the pleasure houses, the mid-corridor money. And at the top, in a ring of private boxes with their own atmospheres and their own service and their own discreet exits, sat the several hundred beings who between them owned the hunt itself, who had inherited or bought or killed their way into a thing that turned unwanted lives into the most exclusive entertainment the corridor produced. HFY owned the largest of the boxes, and had for a very long time. Ralvayan was old in the way that only the truly wealthy of certain species could be old, which is to say kept, maintained, the failing parts quietly replaced, a mind of formidable and cynical intelligence riding in a body it no longer entirely owned. Ralvayan had watched every hunt for 60 years. Ralvayan had in fact been the one to formalize the Warden protocol, back when the hunts were a chaotic and unprofitable spectacle, and had understood before anyone else that what the audience truly paid for was not death, which was cheap, but inevitability, which was priceless. The audience wanted to watch a thing that could not be escaped, escape being resisted, resistance being overcome. That was the product. The Warden was the product. The quarry was only the medium the product was written on. And Ralvayan had just watched the medium look into the lens and offer to negotiate. "Run that back," Ralvayan said to the box's attendant, a soft-spoken functionary named Pulis who had served the box for 30 years and had learned to read the old being's silences. The last thing. What she said. The pain filled again with the girl's face, close and bloodied and calm, and the audio came through the box's fine speakers, unhurried and clear. "I want to talk to you about your investment." "She's playing to the market," Pulis said. "They do that sometimes, the clever ones. They think if they can make the audience like them, the audience will." "No," Ralvayan said. "No, that's not it. Look at her eyes. She isn't playing to the market. She's telling the market something. That's different. That's very different." The old being was quiet for a moment and then made a low sound that Pulis had learned to recognize over 30 years as the sound of Ralvayan becoming interested in a way that usually costs someone a great deal. "Pulis. What are her odds?" Pulis consulted the market. "Long. She's the leader, she's lasted longest, but the Warden's closing and the models don't like her position. She's in the Talwood Ravine country with no high ground and the Warden between her and the only water she can reach without doubling back. The models give her," he checked, "another 6 hours, maybe 8. She's the favorite to be the last taken, which is worth something. But she's still quarry. She still dies. They all die. That's the product. Yes, I built the product." Ralvain turned slowly, the old body complaining, and looked at Pulis with eyes that had watched 60 years of the corridor's cruelty turn a profit. Buy her. Pulis blinked. Buy her death rights, the exclusive. However the instrument is structured now, by the position that pays on how she ends. Buy all of it you can get before the market understands why. The old being turned back to the pane, where the girl's face still hung, frozen, red-toothed and unafraid. I have watched 1,100 of them die. I have never once been surprised, and that creature just surprised me, and I am too old and too rich to leave a surprise lying in the open where someone else might pick it up. Buy her, Pulis. I want to own how this ends. Pulis went to buy her, and did not understand, yet, that his master had just made the first mistake of the hunt, which was to decide that the ending was a thing that could be owned. Down in the Talwood, 40 kilometers below and utterly indifferent to the market that priced her, Sable Vance was running toward the last place her hunters expected her to go, which was east, toward the Warden, because east was also where she had heard, on the second night, a sound that did not belong. She had been high on a ridge on the second night, resting in the fork of a great tree because the ground was not safe, and the collar had been quiet for once, and in the quiet she had heard, far off to the east, a human voice. Not words, just a voice, a man's voice, raised once and cut off, the specific shape of a shout that someone tries to swallow halfway out because they have remembered too late that they are being hunted. It had come from the direction of a long dark scar in the forest that she had marked on her mental map as a place to avoid, a drowned valley where the Talwood's river spread out into swamp, and she had thought, at the time, only that one of the others was over there, and was probably going to die soon, and she had felt the small cold guilt of a creature that has decided its own survival comes first. She was not deciding that anymore. She ran east. She ran the way her mother had taught her, which was not the way anyone watching would have expected a hunted creature to run. She did not run in a straight line, because a straight line was a vector, and a vector was a prediction, and a prediction was how the drones handed you to the thing that killed you. She ran in a series of decisions, each one made fresh at the moment of making it, reading the ground and the wind and the sightlines and choosing the next 20 meters and then the next, so that her path had no logic that a model could learn, because it had no logic at all except the logic of the specific ground under her specific feet at each specific moment. It was slower than running straight. It was much harder. It was the difference between being predicted and being alive. And she watched the drones. There were always drones. She had counted them on the first day, learning their patterns the way she learned everything, and she had understood their weakness by the second. There were a great many of them, but they were not everywhere. They had to be somewhere, and the somewhere was chosen by a system that sent them to where the interesting thing was, which was her, which meant that if she could make a place seem uninteresting, she could move through it half-seen. She had learned to read the swarm's attention the way she read the forests, as a field of pressure, thicker here and thinner there, and she threaded the thin places, and she gave the thick places a face and a laugh and a running body that told the market exactly the story it had paid for, the story of the doomed doe, so that the part of her that was actually thinking could work unwatched. The market wanted a story. She would give it a story. She had understood lying in the ferns that this was the lever, the long lever with the good fulcrum, the one that could move the whole weight of the thing. The hunt was not a hunt. It was a story about a hunt, sold to an audience, and a story could be stolen. A story could be taken over by a better storyteller. And Sable Vance, Deathworld daughter of a Deathworld mother, had been raised inside the hardest school of story there was, the school that taught you that the tale you told your hunters about yourself was the most important weapon you would ever carry, more important than any blade, because the blade only killed the body and the story killed the certainty, and it was certainty that made a hunter a hunter. So she ran east, and she let them film her running, and she gave the lens, whenever it found her, exactly one thing. She was not afraid. Every time a drone dropped through the canopy and found her, She gave it a face that was calm, or amused, or once, crossing a fallen log over a drop that would have killed her, openly, gloriously laughing, so that up on the ring the story the market was telling itself began, drone by drone, to change. The doomed doe was not behaving like a doe. The doomed doe was going somewhere, and an audience that had paid to watch a thing be inevitable found itself, against its will, beginning to wonder. She reached the edge of the drowned valley in the gray light of late afternoon, and she stopped at the tree line and read it, and she did not like what she read. The valley was a wide, shallow bowl where the river lost its way, spreading into a maze of black water and reed islands and half-sunk trees, the whole of it hazed with a low mist that the drones would hate because mist scattered their sensors, which was good, and which was also why the boy was still alive. She saw him after a moment because he had chosen his spot well. He was out on one of the reed islands, maybe 200 meters into the swamp, crouched in the roots of a dead tree with black water all around him, and he had smeared himself with mud until he was very nearly a part of the island, and he was not moving, and if she had not been looking for a human, she would have taken another hour to find him. He was the boy from the holding block, the one younger than her, 13 or 14, and even at this distance she could read the story of his 4 days in the set of his shoulders. He had gone to ground. He had found the one place the Warden could not easily follow, the deep swamp where a 4-meter predator would flounder, and a light, quick thing could pick its way across the reed islands, and he had stopped running and started hiding, and it had worked. It had kept him alive, and it was also going to kill him, because you could not hide your way out of the hunt. The spiral always closed. The swamp only made his spiral slower. She was about to move toward the water's edge when she saw the second thing, and went still. There was a woman at the far side of the valley. Not a human. Sable knew the silhouette after a moment's study. A tall, spindly shape moving along the opposite tree line with a careful economy that was almost, but not quite, as good as her own. One of the corridor species, she thought. A thren maybe, or something like it. And it too was moving toward the boy's island. And it too was doing it carefully, and Sable understood, watching, that she was not the only quarry who had decided the swamp was worth the risk, and that she was not the only one who had found the boy. The question was what the woman wanted with him. Sable crouched at the tree line in the failing light, mud to her elbows, a gash over her eye and a boot in pieces, 16 years old and hunted by a thing that had never failed, and she watched 2 strangers converge on a hiding child in a drowned valley while 10,000 drones and 40,000 shareholders, and one very old and very rich being who had just bought the rights to her death all watched her in turn, and she felt, rising in her chest, not fear, but the thing that in her family took the place of fear. She felt the old cold readiness. She felt the story turning under her hands. And she smiled in the mist where no lens could see it, and she went down toward the water. She went into the swamp low and quiet, and the black water took her to the waist and was warmer than she expected, and she moved through it the way she moved through everything, testing each step before she trusted it, because a swamp was a liar and its bottom was a promise it did not keep. The mist closed over her. Above, she heard the pitch of the drones change as they lost her in it, and she felt the swarm's attention thin, and she used the thinning. She reached the boy's island before the woman did, because she had read the water better, had found the firmer line between the reed beds where the bottom held, and she came up out of the black water into the roots of his dead tree so quietly that he did not hear her until she was an arm's length away. And then he came awake all at once with a strangled sound and a wild swing of something in his hand that turned out to be a sharpened stick. And Sable caught his wrist without effort and held it and put her other hand flat over his mouth and said, very low, "Human, I'm human. Look at me. Look." He looked. His eyes were enormous, whites showing all around, and he was younger than she'd thought, 13 at most, and he had the specific hollowed look of a child who has been afraid for so long that fear has become the shape of him. But he looked, and he saw her face, and something in it reached him, some recognition below thought, the recognition of one Deathworld thing for another, and the fight went out of his wrist. "There's another one coming," she breathed, taking her hand from his mouth. "Tall, thin, thren or close to it from the far side. I don't know if she's friendly. Stay flat, stay still. Let me handle it." "They're all quarry," the boy whispered, his voice cracked. "We're all quarry. If she finds me, she'll give me up. They do that. If you lead the warden to someone else, it goes for them instead and you get more time. I watched. On the second day I watched a man do it too." He stopped. He was shaking. "Everyone gives everyone up. That's the game. That's the whole game." And there it was, Sable thought. That was the real design, deeper than the warden, deeper than the drones. That was the thing the hunt was actually built on. Not one predator against 40 prey. 40 prey against each other. Each one able to buy a few more hours by feeding another to the thing. So that the audience got to watch not just death but betrayal. Got to watch the desperate arithmetic of creatures deciding who to sell. And there was no better spectacle in the corridor than that. Than watching decent beings become monsters to live one more day. The warden was the product, but the betrayal was the profit. She saw it whole, kneeling in the mud with a shaking child, and she understood that the thing she had to break was not the warden at all. "What's your name?" she said. "Tem." His teeth were chattering though the water was warm. "Tem. We were on a hauler, my sister and me, and there was a debt and they—" He stopped again. He was learning 4 days too late that there was no point to the sentence. "Tem," Sable said. "I'm Sable. Here's what's true. You're right that everyone gives everyone up. That's the game." She held his eyes. "So we're going to play a different game. Starting right now, you and me, we don't give anyone up. Not each other, not the Thren, not any of them. We do the opposite. We collect people. Everyone we find, we keep. Do you understand what happens if we do that?" He shook his head, mute. "Then watch," she said, "and find out." And she turned to face the tree line because the Thren had reached the water and was coming across. The Thren came the way a careful predator comes, which was almost the way Sable would have come, and that told her something before the creature had said a word. It was tall, over 2 meters, even folded low, silver-skinned and quilled, and it moved through the reed beds with a spare, deliberate grace, and it had a length of vine coiled in one long hand that it had clearly been using as a tool to test the water, to snare small things, and it had survived 4 days on a stage world with no weapons and no allies, and that meant it was not soft and not stupid, and Sable revised her plan even as she stood. Because the plan had assumed a frightened stranger, and this was not a frightened stranger. This was a survivor. Survivors were harder to recruit and worth infinitely more. The Thren saw her at 10 meters and stopped, and its quills rose, and its free hand came up, empty, palm out. A gesture that Sable's collar did not need to translate because some things were older than language. Then it spoke, and the collar rendered it in a dry, precise contralto. "You are the human," the Thren said. "The one they are all watching, the one who laughed." A pause, the quills shifted. "I have been listening to the announcements. It is difficult not to. You have become the whole of the story. Which means the warden will come to you before it comes to me. And I have been thinking, human, that the wisest thing I could do in this valley is exactly nothing, and stay very near you, and let it take you while I am simply present and buy myself another day." The empty hand did not waver. "I am telling you this because I have decided not to do it. I want you to know that I considered it, and chose otherwise because I am tired, human, of the choices this thing makes me consider. My name is Ithra. I would like to hear your different game." The child spoke of a different game. Sable looked at the tall silver creature standing to its waist in black water with its palm open and its quills betraying its fear, and she felt the specific warmth she felt only rarely, the warmth of finding, in a bad place, a person who had decided the same thing she had decided. It was the only kind of love her family had ever really trusted. She did not smile with her mouth, because the drones were beginning to find them again, the mist thinning, and a face given to the lens was a gift given to the enemy. She smiled with everything else. "The different game," she said. is that we stop being 40 things that die one at a time and start being one thing that's 40 strong. There's a warden that's never failed. It's never failed because it's only ever faced one of us at a time, scared and running and alone. It's never faced all of us at once, standing still, ready and thinking. Nothing's ever faced that. Not the people who built it. We're going to be the first thing it faces that it can't win against. And when we've beaten it, we're going to make the people who watch pay to have watched. Because the collar on my throat translates every word I say straight up to 40,000 shareholders. And I have some things to tell them about what their investment is about to become. Ithra was quiet for a moment. Then it made a sound the collar rendered as a short, dry laugh. The first laugh Sable had heard from anyone but herself in 4 days. "You are insane," Ithra said. "You are a child and you are insane, and you have just described the only thing I have wanted to hear since they put me in the cage." It waded closer and lowered its palm, and the gesture became a different one, an offer. "Tell me where to stand." And that was two. They did not have long. Sable had known from the moment she smiled that the swarm would find them, and it did, the mist thinning as the afternoon died, the drones dropping through in ones and twos, and then a dozen, and the announcer's warm voice bloomed in her skull. "And there it is, shareholders, there it is, the moment I promised you would come. Our little doe has found company. 2 of the remaining quarry converged in the drowned valley, and my, this is unusual. They're not fighting. They're not fleeing one another. They appear to be," the professional voice hunted for the word, "cooperating." A beat, and then the announcer recovered, smooth as oil. "How touching. How very touching and how very foolish, because the models tell me the Warden has crossed the eastern ridge and is entering the valley now, and cooperation, my friends, has never once changed an outcome in the history of this hunt. Watch closely. This is the part where the alliance becomes the betrayal. It always does. Watch how fast." Sable heard it, and she lifted her face to the nearest drone, and she gave the market its first real look at what she was, which was not a doe at all. "You keep saying it always does," she said to the lens, to the 40,000, her voice level and carrying and entirely without fear. "You keep telling them it always breaks. Every hunt the alliance breaks, the friends betray, the outcome holds. You've built your whole certainty on always." She wiped blood and swamp water from her eye with the back of her hand. "Here's the thing about always. It just means nobody's broken it yet." She smiled at the machine, red-toothed and calm. "My name is Sable Vance. Watch how fast." And 40 kilometers up in the great gallery, 10,000 shareholders leaned forward at once, and the odds on the girl called Sable Vance began, for the first time in the history of the hunt, to move the wrong way. Then the Warden came into the valley, and the mist at the eastern tree line folded around a shape 4 meters tall, and the swamp went silent, and Sable Vance turned to face the thing that had never failed, with a stranger at her shoulder and a child at her back, and she began. The first rule of the thing her mother had taught her, before running and before rock and before the breathing that quieted the animal, was this: you do not fight the predator. You fight the ground the predator stands on. A thing that has never failed because it has always fought on ground it chose, and the whole of the art is to make it fight on ground you chose instead. And by the time it understands the ground has changed, the fight is already over. Sable had chosen the ground before she went into the water. She had chosen it in the first 30 seconds of reading the valley from the tree line, the way she read all ground, as a set of holds and refusals, and she had seen what the drowned valley was. A place where a 4-meter predator was heavy, and a light, quick thing was not, and the difference was the whole plan. "Tem," she said, low and fast, not looking away from the shape in the mist. "The channels between the islands, the deep water. You've been here 4 days, you know them. Which one's deepest? Where does the bottom fall away?" The boy's voice shook, but he answered, because she had asked him a question he knew the answer to, and a question you can answer is a rope out of panic. "The middle channel. Between here and the big island. It goes over my head. There's a current under it, it pulls, on the first day I nearly went under it." Good, perfect, that's our ground. She turned her head a fraction. Ithra, the vine, how much do you have? How strong is it? Enough to snare a thing my own weight, the Thren said. It is fibrous, it holds. Why? Because a thing that weighs 4 meters, Sable said, walks on the bottom. It doesn't swim, look at it, look how it's built. All that reach and all that weight, it wades and it walks. And a thing that walks on the bottom of a swamp is a thing that can be made to step where the bottom isn't. She was moving as she spoke, easing backward across the reed island, and the boy and the Thren moved with her, and the Warden came on through the mist, unhurried, folding and unfolding its long limbs, its narrow eyeless head turning to taste the air. Here's what we do, and we do it exactly, and nobody improvises because it works once. We give it me. It wants me. It's been given my scent for 4 days. It's the whole story. I go out onto the reeds toward the middle channel, and I make it chase me, and I take it across the deep water where the bottom falls away and the current pulls, right at the edge, where it has to commit its weight or lose me. And when it commits its weight, she looked at Ithra, that's when the vine goes around the ankle, the near hind ankle, the one carrying the weight when it's mid-step over the drop, and then we don't hold it. We can't hold it, it's too strong, don't try. We just take that one leg out from under it for 1 second over the deep water with the current pulling. That's all. 1 leg, 1 second, 1 place. And the swamp does the rest. Ithra looked at the 4-meter shape and looked at the black channel, and Sable watched the calculation move across its silver face and resolve into something that was not quite hope, but was in the same family. It will not drown, the Thren said. A thing like that does not drown quickly. It doesn't have to drown, Sable said. It has to be down. In the water off its feet, fighting the current and the mud, for long enough that it stops being a predator and starts being a thing in trouble. Because a predator that's never in trouble hunts forever. But a predator that finds itself in trouble in front of 10,000 cameras, in front of 40,000 shareholders who paid for a thing that can't fail, she smiled, and it was not a kind smile. That predator is worth nothing to them anymore. And they'll pull it. They'll have to, you'll see. She did not have time to explain the rest, because the Warden had reached the near edge of the reeds and stopped, and turned its head toward her, and made a sound. It was a sound Sable would carry for the rest of her life. It was low, below the floor of proper hearing, a pressure more than a noise, and it came up through the black water and through the soles of her feet and through the marrow of her. A sound that some very old part of every living thing recognized and answered with the urge to freeze, to be small, to already be dead so that the dying was over. It was a sound built by 100 million years of a world she had never seen, refined to do exactly one thing, which was to end the argument before it began, to reach past the mind of the prey and speak directly to the animal, and tell the animal it was already lost. Tem made a small broken noise and folded down into the roots, gone, the animal winning. Ithra's quills flattened to its skull and its long body locked, and it stood frozen in the water, the vine loose in a hand that had forgotten it. And Sable Vance, 16 years old, daughter of a Deathworld, felt the sound reach down into her and take hold of the animal at the bottom of her, and she felt the animal want to freeze. And she did the thing her mother had spent her whole childhood teaching her to do, the thing that was the actual inheritance, worth more than any weapon. She felt the fear arrive, and she read it, and she did not obey it. She laughed. She threw her head back in the black water in front of the thing that had never failed, and she laughed, loud and bright and real, because the sound was trying so hard. It was doing everything a sound could do. 100 million years of murder distilled into a single note, and it was aimed at an animal that had been built by a world worse than the Warden's, a world that made sounds like that all day and called them weather, and the note that was supposed to end her broke over her like water over a stone. She laughed at it. She laughed at the smallness of it, at the effort of it, at the certainty behind it, and the laugh did something the sound could not have predicted, because the laugh reached Ithra. The Thren's frozen eyes moved. Its quills, flat to its skull, lifted a fraction. It heard the child laugh in the face of the thing that had ended 1,100 lives, and the laugh reached past the sound and past the animal and touched the person, and the person came back into the silver body, and Ithra breathed, and its long fingers closed around the vine. "Tim," Sable said, not loud, still smiling at the warden. "Get up. You don't have to be brave, you just have to be alive. Get in the deep channel now, all the way under the big island's roots where it can't reach, and you wait and you keep your sister's face in your head and you stay alive. That's your whole job. Alive. Go." And Tim, who had been given a job he could do, went, sliding off the far side of the island into the black water, and was gone under the roots, and was alive. And up on the ring the market noticed that the child had not been given up, had in fact been sent to safety, and the story the market was telling itself lurched again. "Ithra," Sable said, "you know your part. Wait for the wait, not before, when it commits." "I know my part," said the Thren. Sable stepped out onto the reeds toward the middle channel, into the open, into full view of the swarm and the market and the thing 4 meters tall, and she raised her arms wide, small and ragged and streaked with mud, and she called out to the predator that had never failed, in a clear carrying voice that the collar dutifully translated up to 40,000 shareholders who had paid to watch her be afraid. "Hey," she shouted at the warden. "Hey, you old ghost, you want the story. I'm the story, come and get the story." And she turned, and she ran out across the reeds toward the deep water, and the thing that had never failed unfolded to its full 4 meters against the mist, and came. It was faster than anything that size had a right to be. Sable had known it would be, had watched it move twice before and priced its speed, but knowing a thing and outrunning it were different debts, and she ran now with the specific total commitment of a creature that has understood there is no reserve to hold back, everything spent on the next reed and the next, her bare heel and her ruined boot slapping the wet mat of vegetation, the reeds bending and sucking underfoot, the water flashing black between them. Behind her the warden came, and she did not hear it. That was the terror of it. A thing that size should have thundered, and instead it flowed, near silent, the only sound the wet parting of the reeds as it took the same path she took a half-second behind. She did not run straight. Even now, even here, she did not run straight, because straight was where it would be, straight was the prediction. And she cut and broke and doubled a half step at a time, buying centimeters, and the warden corrected, and each correction costed a fraction of the ground she'd bought, and that fraction was the only reason she reached the edge of the deep channel alive. She reached it and did not stop. This was the part that could not be taught and could not be rehearsed and could only be done or not done. The part her mother had a word for that did not translate. A word that meant, roughly, the willingness to spend your own life as the bait on your own hook. Sable reached the edge where the bottom fell away into the deep middle channel, and she did not veer along it to safety, because veering was survivable and survivable was useless. The warden would simply follow the safe edge and take her at leisure. She had to make it commit its weight over the drop, and the only way to make a thing that had never failed commit to a place was to be in that place herself, close enough to seize, so that its ancient certainty told it the kill was here now, one more stride. So she went out over the deep water. There was a half-sunk log across the channel, black and slick, that Tim's map in her head had promised, and she went across it at a dead run, arms wide, and at the midpoint of it, over the deepest black pull of the current, she did the thing that spent her life as bait. She stopped. She turned. She faced the warden across 3 meters of open water with the current sucking at the log under her feet, and she looked at the thing with its narrow, eyeless head and its 100-million-year certainty. And she was, for one whole second, exactly what it had been promised, the cornered doe at the end of the run, and everything in its ancient architecture told it that the story ended here, and it committed its weight to the last stride and came off the firm reeds and put its near hind foot down into the drop, into the deep water and the pulling current, to take her. "Now," Sable said. And Ithra, who had gone into the water on the far side, while the warden's whole attention burned toward the girl on the log, who had been waiting flat and silent in the reeds at the channel's edge with the vine doubled in both long hands, rose up out of the black water at exactly the moment the warden's weight came down over the drop, and put the loop of vine around the near hind ankle, and did not pull. That was the genius of it, and Sable had understood it from the first, that you did not pull because you could not pull. The thing outweighed all of them together. You did not take the leg out from under it. You simply did not let the leg go where it needed to go. The warden's foot came down expecting bottom and found a snare instead of purchase, and its enormous weight was already committed, already falling toward the girl, and with one hind foot fouled and the current pulling and the bottom falling away, the thing that had never failed did the one thing it had never once had to learn how to do. It lost its footing. It was not dramatic. That was what Sable would remember, that the moment the whole hunt turned on was not dramatic at all. The warden simply tilted, its committed weight carrying it forward and its snared foot refusing to follow, and it went down sideways into the deep black channel with a sound like a landslide entering the sea. And the current took it, the current that Tem had nearly gone under on the first day, and the 4-meter apex predator that had ended 1,100 lives went off its feet into deep moving water for the first time in its existence, and thrashed. And 40 kilometers up, in 10,000 suites and one great gallery, the feeds showed the warden down. For a long moment, the announcer said nothing at all. The warm professional voice, which had never in 11 hunts been at a loss, simply stopped, and in the silence Sable heard through the collar the sound of 40,000 shareholders making, all at once, the same small involuntary noise. Then the announcer recovered, but it was not smooth anymore. There was a crack in the oil. An incident, shareholders, a momentary. The warden has entered deep water, an unusual, a most unusual. But of course a predator of this class in its element will. It was not in its element, that was the whole thing. Sable stood on the black log over the churning channel and watched the warden fight the water, and she saw that it did not know how, that 100 million years of a world had taught it everything except this, had never once required it to swim because on its world the prey had come to firm ground to die, and it thrashed with all its terrible strength, and its strength did nothing. The current turned it, the fouled foot dragged, the eyeless head went under and came up and went under. And the drones that had been filming a doomed girl swung around, all of them, 10,000 lenses turning as one to film the thing that could not fail, failing, in deep water, on camera, live, to 40,000 people who had bet their fortunes on the word always. "Ithra," Sable called. "Let it go, drop the vine, get out of the water, it can still take you." And the Thren released the vine and slid back through the reeds to firm ground, and Sable came off the log the same way, light and fast, and they stood on the reed island with Tem coming up out of the roots between them. 3 ragged bodies watching the great predator turn slowly downstream in the pulling current, alive, unhurt, entirely undrowned, and utterly, visibly in trouble. She had told Ithra the truth. It did not need to drown, it only needed to be seen to be a thing in trouble. Because up on the ring, the market that had priced the warden's certainty at the center of everything now had to reprice it, live, in real time, and Sable watched the repricing happen through the collar, heard it in the announcer's failing voice, and felt it in the whole tenor of the attention pouring down on her. 40,000 beings who had been watching a story about inevitability suddenly watching a story about something else, and not one of them able to look away. She turned to the nearest drone. There were a great many of them now. She had the largest audience any quarry in the history of the hunt had ever commanded, and she knew it, and she had planned for this exact moment since the ferns, since before the ferns, since the holding block, since the day her mother had first told her that the tale you tell your hunters is the only weapon that never runs out. "There it is," Sable said to the lens, quietly letting the collar carry it up. "The thing that never fails, look at it. It's not failing because I'm strong. I'm not strong. Look at me." She held her muddy arms out, small, ragged, 16. It's failing because for 11 hunts you only ever gave it one of us at a time. Alone, scared, running. It never faced 2, it never faced 3. It certainly never faced 40. She let that land. There are 33 of us still alive in this forest. I'm going to go find every single one, and every one I find we keep. And the next time your warden meets us, it won't be meeting a doe. It'll be meeting a wall. She wiped her eye. You bought certainty. I just showed 40,000 of you that your certainty drowns like everything else. So here's my question, shareholders, and I want you to think hard about it because the market's already thinking about it for you. She smiled, red-toothed at all of them. What is a hunt worth when the quarry stops being afraid? And she turned and walked off the reed island into the mist with a Thren and a boy at her side. And behind her the great predator turned slowly in the black current. And 40 kilometers up, in the largest of the private boxes, HFY watched the odds on Sable Vance collapse and invert and become something the market had no model for, and understood that in buying the rights to how she ended, the old being had bought a burning thing, and now had to decide, very quickly, whether to put it out or throw it at an enemy. The old being did not decide right away. That was the thing about HFY that had kept it alive and rich for 60 years. It did not decide until it had to, and it never once mistook motion for progress. So while the gallery around it dissolved into a noise it had never heard in 11 hunts, the noise of very wealthy beings watching a certain thing become uncertain, HFY sat very still in the largest box and watched the girl walk into the mist, and thought. Pulis, it said at last. The attendant came, pale under his scales. The position, he said. The one you had me buy, the exclusive on how she ends. It's HFY, it's worth a fortune now. It's the most valuable instrument in the market. Everyone wants how she ends, the volume is. I know what it's worth. The old being's eyes did not leave the feed. That's not what I want to know, Pulis. In 60 years, has a hunt ever been stopped? Pulis went still, stopped. Called off, aborted. The quarry pulled out, the warden withdrawn. The whole thing ended before an ending. No, Pulis said it carefully because he could feel the shape of the question and did not like it. No, it's never happened, it's not. The contracts don't allow it. The whole instrument is built on the hunt running to its conclusion. If a hunt were stopped, every position pays out to no one, the market. It would be chaos. It would be the end of the... He stopped. Why? Because, HFY said, that child down there has just understood something that took me 60 years to understand, and she understood it in 4 days, and she is about to try to do to the whole hunt what she just did to the warden. She is going to make it a bad investment. She is going to stand in front of the market and drown its certainty over and over in front of 40,000 people until the only rational thing any of them can do is get out. And when they all try to get out at once, the old being made the low sound again, the interested sound, the expensive sound, the hunt ends itself. She doesn't have to escape the forest, Pulis. She has to escape the market, and she's already halfway out. Pulis stared at the feed, at the small figure walking into the mist with a Thren and a child. Then we stop her. We have the exclusive. We can, the collar. We can end her quietly, an accident, a fall, and the story becomes tragedy instead of victory, and the market steadies and the hunt. We could, HFY agreed. Yes. We could kill her with a word right now and steady the market, and I would keep everything I have kept for 60 years. And it would be, Pulis, the single most boring thing I have ever done. The old being turned at last from the feed and looked at its attendant with eyes that had watched 1,000 deaths and found them, every one exactly as advertised. I have been bored for a very long time. I did not know I was bored until that child laughed. Do you understand what I am telling you? I am telling you I do not want to steady the market. I want to see what she does. I want, for the first time in 60 years, to find out how something ends instead of arranging it. A pause. Do not touch the collar. Not you, not the operators, no one. If anyone moves to end her, they move through me first. The other owners will not allow that, Pulis said quietly. They're already, Ralvayan, half the boxes are calling for her to be terminated now before she costs them everything. You can't hold them all. No, the old being agreed. I can't, which is why we are going to do something else. We are going to give her time, and Pulis buy me more, not the exclusive on how she ends, the other instrument, the one nobody's trading yet because nobody believes in it. The old being smiled, a thing its face had nearly forgotten how to do. Buy me the position that pays if the hunt is never finished at all. Buy it cheap, buy it quiet, buy all of it. If that child is going to burn the whole thing down, I intend to be the only one in this gallery holding the match's insurance. Down in the Talwood, night was coming, and Sable Vance was running out of it into a plan that had become, all at once, real and enormous and terrifying in its scope. Because it had worked. That was the thing she was still absorbing as she moved through the darkening forest, Ithra ranging ahead and Tem close at her side. It had actually worked. The Warden was alive, somewhere downstream, and it would find its footing eventually and dry itself and come again, that was certain. But the thing she had needed had happened. 40,000 people had watched it fail, and the story had turned, and now she had to move faster than the market could recover, had to find the other 33 before the Warden reset, and before the owners of the hunt did the thing she was certain they were arguing about right now, which was whether to simply kill her and call it an accident. She had known that risk from the start. The collar could end her. She was nearly sure of it, and the fact that it had not yet meant only that someone up there found her more valuable alive than dead, and that calculus could flip in a heartbeat. So she had to make herself worth more alive than dead, not to one owner, but to the whole market, had to make her survival the thing the money was riding on, had to turn 40,000 strangers into 40,000 people who would lose their fortunes if she died. It was the same trick as the Warden, exactly the same, on a larger board. You did not fight the predator. You changed the ground it stood on until standing there cost it everything. How many did you see? She asked Tem as they moved. In your 4 days, how many others and where? The boy had steadied. Having a job, having a direction, having someone who had not given him up, had done something to the hollowed look. It was not gone, but it had edges now, a person forming back inside it. 3, he said. Besides you and Ithra. There's 2 of them together, north of the valley, up in the thorn breaks. They were traveling as a pair when I saw them. One of them's hurt, drags a leg. And there's one alone west on the high ridges, small, fast. I only saw her once and she was gone. And I heard, he hesitated. The second night I heard the announcements. It said 33 still alive when we found you. That was hours ago. It might be fewer now. The Warden was hunting the whole time it was hunting you. No, Ithra said from ahead without turning. It was hunting only her. Listen to the announcements, child. For 4 days it has hunted only her. She was the story, so she was the only one it was permitted to hunt, because the audience wanted the story finished before it moved on. She has been the shield this whole time and did not know it. The Thren glanced back, quills stirring. The others are alive because you drew it, human, all 33. That is why they must come when you call. You have already saved every one of them once. They simply do not know it yet. Sable took that in as she moved, and felt something settle in her that she would need for what was coming, because the plan required the strangers to believe, and belief was the hardest thing to manufacture in a forest full of people who had spent 4 days learning that everyone gives everyone up. She could not simply find 33 terrified survivors and tell them to trust her. Trust was not a thing you could ask for. It was a thing you demonstrated, once, so undeniably that the demonstration did the arguing for you. She had demonstrated it in the swamp. Now she had to broadcast it. The announcements go both ways, she said slowly, thinking it through aloud, which was a thing her mother had let her do because sometimes the plan was in the mouth before it was in the mind. The collar translates what I say up to the market, but the market, Ithra, do the others have collars, all of them? All of us, the Thren said. It is how they track us, and how they speak to us. On the first day mine told me the rules in my own tongue, very politely, as though it were doing me a courtesy. Then they can hear me. Sable stopped walking. The forest dripped around them, dark now, the drones logging their position in ones and twos, the swarm thinner at night. If the collar carries my voice to the market, and every one of us has a collar, then every one of us is listening to the same announcer, the same feed. Which means when I talk to the market, 33 people in this forest hear it too. I haven't just been talking to 40,000 shareholders. I've been talking to everyone the hunt has left to kill. She looked at Tem, at Ithra, and the plan finished assembling itself in her, whole and clean and enormous. I don't have to find them. I don't have to run all over this forest hoping to stumble on scared people who will run from me. I just have to tell them where to come, all of them, at once, in front of the market. And I have to make it a place the Warden can't win, and a moment the owners can't stop, and I have to make 40,000 shareholders watch me do it. Because as long as they're watching, and as long as they're betting, the owners can't just switch me off without every one of them knowing exactly why. Ithra had stopped too and was looking at her with its head tilted, quills high. "You are going to call all of us to one place," the Thren said slowly. "In the open, where the Warden can find us all together." "Yes. That is the single most dangerous thing anyone has ever proposed in the history of this hunt." "Yes," Sable said. "That's why it'll work, because they've built the whole thing on the certainty that we'll never do it. Everything they own is bet on us staying scattered and scared and selling each other out. The one move the entire hunt is designed to make impossible is the one move that ends it." She was smiling now in the dark, where only her friends could see it. "So we're going to make it, and I know exactly where." "Where?" said Tem. Sable looked up, through the black canopy, toward the faint grinding glow on the horizon where the ring's machinery met the world, toward the one feature of the Talwood she had marked on the first day and set aside as too dangerous to approach. The place the drones swarmed thickest, and the announcer's voice was always warmest, because it was the place the hunt was proudest of, the place built to be the stage for the final kill. "The amphitheater," she said. "They built us an ending, a beautiful one, cliffs on 3 sides, one way in, cameras on every angle, the place they drive the last quarry to die where it films best." She smiled wider. "They spent a fortune making the perfect place to watch one of us die alone. So we're going to go there, all of us together, and we're going to make it the perfect place to watch their Warden lose, in front of everyone, with no way for them to cut the feed without admitting to 40,000 people that they're afraid of what a girl might say next." She turned and started walking north, toward the thorn breaks and the pair with the hurt leg, the first 2 of 33, the first 2 bricks of the wall. "Come on," she said. "We've got a lot of people to collect, and the Warden's going to be dry by morning." The collecting took the whole of the night and half the next day, and it was the hardest thing Sable had ever done, harder than the swamp, harder than the run, because you could plan against a predator but you could not plan against fear, and fear was what she had to move through now, 33 separate weathers of it, each one different. The pair and the thornbrakes came first. They were not human. They were a mated pair of a low, squat species Sable did not have a name for, gray and heavy-jointed, and one of them dragged a leg that had been broken and badly set, and they had survived by moving slowly and staying in the thorn where nothing large could follow, and when Sable came to them out of the dark, they did exactly what Tem had said everyone did, which was assume she had come to give them up. The uninjured one put itself between her and its mate, and bared a mouth full of grinding plates, and made a sound that needed no translation. She did not argue. Arguing was for people who had time and trust, and she had neither. Instead, she did the thing her mother had taught her to do with a frightened animal, which was to make herself small, to sit down in the thorns in front of them with her hands open on her knees, and to wait, and to let the silence do the work. And while she waited, she told them quietly, in a voice with no push in it, exactly one true thing. "The Warden's been hunting me for 4 days, she said. "Only me. That's why you're still alive. I'm not here to give you up. I'm here because I'm tired of being the reason you're alive by accident, and I'd rather be the reason you're alive on purpose." She let that sit. "There's a place where it can't win. I'm taking everyone there. You don't have to trust me. You just have to be somewhere better than the thorn break when the announcements say to come. That's all. I'll leave if you want. But when you hear my voice tell everyone where to go, come. Bring the leg. We've got people who can carry." And then she left, because leaving was the demonstration. Because a thing that comes to give you up does not turn around and walk away. And the walking away said what no argument could. And she was 2 ridges gone before she heard, behind her in the dark, the heavy pair moving, following at a distance, unwilling to close it and unwilling to lose her, which was exactly the distance trust started at. That was 4. The small fast one on the western ridges was harder, because she was human, Deathworld human, and Deathworld humans did not spook and did not follow and did not trust. They calculated. And Sable found her not by tracking her but by stopping tracking her, and instead going to the one place on the ridge with water and shelter and good sightlines, the place Sable herself would have chosen, and waiting there, because a Deathworld human always came back to the good ground eventually. She was maybe 18, lean and scarred. With a length of sharpened metal she'd worried off some piece of the hunt's own infrastructure. And she came into the shelter at dawn and found Sable already there, sitting with her back to the good rock, and she did not startle. She simply stopped, and the 2 of them looked at each other with the flat, assessing gaze of 2 predators recognizing a third. "You're the one they're all watching," the woman said. "The one who put the Warden in the water." Her name, she said, was Roan. She had been in the shelter's twin on some other ridge watching Sable's whole plan unfold through the announcements, and she had a question, only one, and it was the right question, the Deathworld question. "What's it cost me?" "Everything, maybe," Sable said. "I'm not going to lie to you, Roan, because you'd know. Here's the true version. I'm gathering everyone at the amphitheater. All of us, one place in the open in front of the whole market. The Warden's going to come. Maybe the owners will pull something worse than the Warden, I don't know. People are probably going to die. But right now we die one at a time, scattered for their entertainment, and everyone gives everyone up, and it's the loneliest way there is to die. What I'm offering is we die, if we die together on our feet, having taken the thing that hunts us and put it in the water in front of 40,000 people. And if it works," she held Roan's eyes, "if it works, none of us die because I'm going to make it cost the market more to finish this hunt than to end it, and they'll end it themselves and we walk out. That's the cost. That's the offer. Everything maybe for a real chance instead of a lonely certainty." Roan was quiet for a long moment. Then she did a thing that surprised Sable, which was smile, a real one, sharp and tired. "My grandmother," Roan said, "used to say that the only sin our people had was dying alone when we didn't have to." She hefted the sharpened metal, turned it, slid it into her belt. "I'm in, and I know where 6 others are because unlike the soft ones I've been counting, you lead. I'll gather the West." That was 5, and then 11, because Roan was as good as her word and better, and by mid-morning the thing had begun to have a momentum of its own, because that was the secret Sable had gambled everything on and had not been sure of until she saw it happen. Fear scattered, but courage gathered. The first ones came because Sable found them and demonstrated. But after the first ones, the ones after them came because they saw others coming, because a single small figure walking toward the amphitheater was a doomed fool, but 11 figures walking together were a thing, a new thing. A thing the forest had never held, and terrified people who would never have followed a leader followed a crowd, because a crowd meant they were not the last one left to be afraid. The announcer felt it. Sable heard the warm voice curdling through the collar all morning, heard it try to make the gathering into a spectacle of its own, then try to make it a folly. Then, as the numbers grew, heard it begin, unmistakably, to sound afraid. An extraordinary development, shareholders. The quarry appear to be congregating, converging on the eastern approach to the amphitheater. And while I'm sure this will make for a most dramatic culmination, I would remind our shareholders that a gathering of quarry is simply a gathering of targets, that the Warden, which I'm pleased to report has fully recovered and is moving to intercept. The Warden will find them all in one place, a great convenience, and, the voice faltered, recovered. And I would caution against reading too much into what is, after all, merely a herd. He's scared, Tem said, wonderingly listening. The announcer, he's scared. He's a professional, Sable said. He can hear the market same as us. And the market's terrified because the one story they can't sell is the one that's happening. They can sell us dying. They can sell us betraying each other. They can even sell us fighting the Warden and losing. That's a fine story, that's inevitability. The one thing they can't sell, the one thing that breaks the whole instrument, is us not being afraid. And we're about to give 40,000 people a very long, very clear look at a whole crowd of quarry that isn't afraid. That's the shot they can't take. That's the thing they can't allow. Which means from here on, everything they do out of fear, and a thing that acts out of fear makes mistakes, and we are going to be standing exactly where the mistakes land. And that was the other thing Sable learned as the column grew, the thing she had not planned for and had not expected and would carry longer than the plan itself, that the collecting changed the collected. She watched it happen face by face through the long morning. A being that had spent 4 days deciding, every hour, which of its fellow quarry it might feed to the Warden to buy itself another day, could not carry that arithmetic and also carry the weight of a stranger with a broken leg. And so, one by one, as they took a turn under someone else's arm, as they gave up their own better ground so a hurt one could rest, the survivors set the arithmetic down. She saw the heavy gray pair, who had bared their grinding plates at her in the thorn, stop at a stream to fill a scavenged shell with water, and carry it back 100 meters to a debtor from the third cage who had not asked. She saw Roan, hard as the ridges she'd come off, give her own scavenged blade to a shaking creature who had none, and take the shaking creature's fear onto herself instead, and become, by giving the weapon away, more dangerous than she had been holding it. The hunt had been built to turn decent beings into monsters to live one more day. Sable had understood that in the swamp. What she had not understood, until she watched it reverse in front of her, was that the machine ran both ways, that if betrayal was manufactured by isolation, then loyalty could be manufactured by its opposite, that you could take 33 creatures the corridor had taught to sell each other, and, simply by putting them shoulder to shoulder, and giving each one someone weaker to protect, remake every one of them into a thing that would die before it broke the line. It was not magic and it was not virtue. It was ground. She had changed the ground they stood on, and standing on different ground, they became different. You did that, Ithra said to her quietly, watching the gray pair carry water. You know that. You did that on purpose. My mother did it to me, Sable said. Before I could talk, I'm just passing it down. She watched her column of the corridors unwanted move through the trees, no longer a collection of the doomed but a single thing with 33 parts, and she felt the old warmth again, the only kind of love her family had ever fully trusted. It's the only thing we've ever really had, us. Not the Deathworld, not the not being afraid, just this, that we turn around and go back for each other. Everything else is decoration. By noon they were 26, moving as one ragged column through the last of the Talwood toward the amphitheater, Humans and Thren, and the heavy gray pair with the broken leg carried now between 2 others. And a dozen species Sable had no names for, debtors and orphans and inconveniences. The corridors swept up unwanted, and they did not look like a herd. Sable, walking at the head of them with Roan on one side and Ithra on the other and Tem at her back, looked at them over her shoulder and understood that they had stopped looking like quarry somewhere in the last hour, that a thing had happened to the set of their shoulders and the way they held their heads, and it was the thing she had been born knowing, and they were learning in a single desperate morning. That the difference between prey and predator was not strength and not speed and not teeth, but which one had decided how the story ended. They had decided. She could see it. 26 ruined strangers had decided how the story ended, and the story they had decided on was not the one the market had bought. 26, and then, at the edge of the amphitheater, 7 more came out of the trees to meet them, drawn by the announcements, drawn by the impossible sight of a crowd, and the column became 33, and then 33 became, as the last stragglers found their courage in the safety of numbers, the whole of the surviving hunt, every quarry still breathing in the Talwood, gathered in one place for the first and only time in 11 hunts. Standing at the mouth of the beautiful killing ground, the owners had built to watch one of them die alone. Sable Vance walked out into the center of the amphitheater, into the full glare of the swarm, 10,000 drones dropping through the open air to film the thing the market could not believe it was seeing, and she stood in the middle of the perfect stage with her people at her back, and she looked up into the largest cluster of lenses, and she began to say the thing that would end it, one way or the other. And far up the eastern approach, where the announcer had promised it would come, the Warden came out of the trees, dry now and recovered and moving with the low folded patience of a thing that has learned, for the first time in its long existence, that it can lose and has come back anyway. And Sable Vance saw it come, and did not stop smiling, because losing once was the only thing that had ever taught anyone anything, and she intended to teach it the rest. The amphitheater was a bowl of pale stone the size of a small city, sculpted by the hunt's engineers out of a natural cirque, cliffs rising sheer on 3 sides and a single wide approach on the 4th, and it had been built for exactly one purpose, which was to make a death look like an opera. The acoustics gathered every sound toward the center. The light fell in a way that flattered. The camera positions had been surveyed for years. It was, Sable had understood the moment she saw it, the most dangerous place in the entire forest, a killing floor with the exits designed into the architecture, and she had brought 33 people to stand in the middle of it on purpose, because the most dangerous place was also the place the market could see best, and being seen was the whole of the weapon now. She stood in the center with her people arranged behind her the way she had spent the last hour teaching them, not a herd and not a mob but a formation, the strong on the outside and the hurt in the middle, Roan's western crew on the left with their scavenged blades, Ithra and the tall ones on the right, the heavy gray pair anchoring the rear with the boy Tem between them because Tem's job still was to stay alive, and she had drilled them on the walk here until they could hold it. And she looked up into the swarm and spoke, and the amphitheater gathered her voice, and the collar carried it up, and 40,000 shareholders and 33 quarry and 1 very old rich being all heard the same words at once. "I want to thank the owners of the hunt," Sable said, "for building us such a beautiful place to make our point." She let the drones drink her in, small and ragged and calm at the center of the bowl. 11 hunts, she said. You sold certainty. You sold 40,000 people the one thing money can never quite buy anywhere else, which is a sure thing. A predator that never fails. A quarry that always dies. Betrayal you could set your clock by. You made the corridors unwanted into a product, and the product was inevitability. And inevitability is the most valuable thing there is, because everything else in your lives can be taken from you but a sure thing. A sure thing feels like control. She smiled. "I put your sure thing in the water yesterday. And today I'm going to do something worse. I'm going to show you what your certainty is actually made of. And once you've seen it, none of you will ever be able to unsee it. And that's going to cost you everything. And there's nothing you can do to stop me except the one thing you can't afford to do on camera." Up the eastern approach, the Warden came on, unhurried, and the crowd of quarry felt it come. And Sable felt them want to break, and she did not let them. "Hold," she said, not loudly, and the acoustics carried it, and they held. "Hold, watch me, not at me. When it charges," she said to the market, to her people, to everyone, "it's going to charge me, because I'm the story. I've been the story for 5 days. It's been built and bred and shaped for 100 million years to go for the one that runs, and I'm the one that's run longest, so it will come for me. and every model in your market says I die in the next 90 seconds, and the odds are moving on it right now. I can feel them moving. I know exactly what you're all doing up there. You're betting on the 90 seconds. She spread her hands. So let's make it interesting. I'm not going to run. And she sat down. In the center of the amphitheater, in the full glare of 10,000 lenses, with a 4-meter apex predator bearing down the approach toward her, Sable Vance sat down on the pale stone, cross-legged, hands open on her knees, and she looked at the Warden coming, and she did the thing that was the whole of her inheritance, the thing worth more than any weapon. She let the fear arrive, and she read it, and she did not obey it, and she laughed. The laugh filled the bowl. The acoustics that had been built to gather screams gathered a girl's laughter instead, and threw it up the cliffs and out to the swarm and up to 40,000 people, bright and ragged and utterly unafraid, and the Warden faltered. It was the first time in 11 hunts that a Warden had faltered on the approach, and the whole market saw it, because 100 million years had built the thing to hunt fear, to read fear, to navigate by fear, the way a sailor navigates by stars. And the thing it was navigating toward had no fear in it, was sitting still and laughing. And for the length of 3 of its long strides the Warden did not know what it was hunting, and it slowed, its eyeless head turning, tasting the air for the terror that should have been there, and finding only a small, warm creature sitting on stone making a sound like water. That was the opening. That was the whole plan, distilled to 2 seconds. Sable had known the Warden could not be beaten by strength and could not be beaten by speed. It could only be beaten by taking away the thing it hunted by, and the thing it hunted by was fear. And the way you took fear from a predator's senses was you refused, with your whole body, in the last instant to feel it. Now, Sable said. And it was not Ithra this time, and it was not the vine, because they had learned in the swamp that you did not fight the predator. You fought the ground it stood on, and Roan's western crew had spent the last hour, on Sable's instruction, doing a thing that filmed as nothing at all. They had loosened the pale flat stones of the amphitheater floor along one specific curved line, the line Sable had walked and marked, the line the Warden would have to cross to reach the girl at the center, and they had loosened them over a place where the engineers, in sculpting the bowl, had cut a drainage channel beneath. A hollow space, a void under the beautiful floor that no one watching had ever thought about because the floor had only ever needed to hold the weight of one dying quarry. Never the committed weight of a 4-meter predator at a full charge. The Warden recovered from its faltering. It found the girl again, sitting, laughing, and its ancient certainty reasserted itself, and it committed to the charge, all its weight, all its speed. The last 20 meters closed in 3 strides, and its enormous foreleg came down on the loosened line over the hollow, at the full weight of the charge, and the beautiful floor the owners had built to make death into opera did the thing floors do when a void beneath them meets a weight above them. It gave. The Warden went down through the collapsing stone with a sound like the end of the world, one foreleg and then its whole front driving into the drainage void, the pale flags folding under it, and its own tremendous momentum drove it down and forward into the hollow it could not have known was there. And it was, for the second time in 2 days, off its feet, this time in a stone trap of the hunt's own making. Its front half wedged and thrashing in the broken floor of the killing ground the owners had spent years perfecting. And Sable Vance stood up, unhurried, 3 meters from the trapped and thrashing Warden, dusted the pale grit off her ruined trousers, and looked up into the swarm and stopped laughing, because the next part was not funny, the next part was the part that ended it. There it is again, she said quietly, and the bowl gathered her quiet and made it enormous. Your certainty, in a hole, in the floor you built, and here's what I need every one of you to understand because your fortunes depend on understanding it in the next 60 seconds. She turned slowly, taking in the swarm, the cliffs, the invisible market above. I could kill it now. It's helpless. 33 of us and 1 trapped Warden. We could end it right here, and you'd have to sell that, the Warden dead, the myth dead, and every position built on it worth nothing. Or you could pull it. Send in the extraction, save your breeding stock. Admit on camera to 40,000 people that your unbeatable Warden had to be rescued from a 16-year-old girl. Either way, the certainty's gone. Either way, the product's dead. You built a thing that could only ever be worth something as long as it never lost, and I've made it lose twice, in 2 days, in front of everyone, and there is no version of the next 5 minutes where you get your certainty back. She let that land, all of it, into a silence that stretched up 40 kilometers. So here's my offer, Sable said, and it's the only one, and it expires when I stop talking. End the hunt. Now, all of it. Withdraw the Warden, unlock these collars, and put every one of us, all 34, because there are 34 of us alive, I counted, you didn't. Put every one of us on a lawful transit off this world to a statute-protected port, logged, witnessed on the record. Do that and the hunt ends with a story you can almost sell. The Warden retired undefeated, withdrawn at the height of drama, a legend rested. A lie, but a survivable lie. She smiled without warmth. Or don't. Kill me with the collar right now, the way half of you have been screaming to since yesterday. And the last thing 40,000 people will ever have watched me do is offer you mercy. And the story becomes a martyrdom. And martyrdoms don't retire, they spread. And every unwanted debtor and orphan and inconvenience in the corridor learns my name and learns that a girl sat down and laughed, and a whole hunt came apart. And you will never sell certainty to anyone ever again, because I'll have proven to the entire corridor, with my death, that your sure thing can be beaten by a child who simply decided how the story ended. She spread her open hands. Those are the 2 endings. Retire the legend or make the martyr. Choose fast. I'm almost done talking. And she stopped. And 40 kilometers up in the great gallery, in a silence no hunt had ever held, 40,000 shareholders sat frozen in front of the frozen market, every position suspended, every model broken, every one of them doing the arithmetic the girl had handed them. And in the largest of the private boxes, HFY, who had spent 60 years arranging endings and had just watched a child arrange a better one than the old being had ever conceived, began, quietly, to laugh. Pulis, Ralvayan said, when the laughing had subsided, wiping at an eye that had not produced anything in a very long time. The position, the one nobody was trading, the one that pays if the hunt is never finished. You own all of it, Pulis said faintly. He had been watching the market do things markets were not supposed to be able to do. You're the only holder. If the hunt ends without a conclusion, without a kill, it pays out to you. All of it. Everyone else's position collapses to nothing, and yours, Ralvayan, it's the largest single settlement in the history of the... Then it seems, the old being said, that my interests and the child's have become, by the most delicious accident, precisely the same. It rose, the maintained body complaining, and turned to the box's controls, the ones that connected the largest owner's voice to the whole gallery and the whole market, and when the largest owner chose, to the collar of any quarry in the field. The other owners are about to try to kill her. Half of them have already sent the order to the collar operators. They're being blocked by me. But I can't hold them much longer, and if even one of them gets through, she dies, and the story becomes exactly the martyrdom she promised, and we are all ruined, myself most of all. A pause. So we are going to do the other thing. We are going to give her the ending she offered, and I am going to be the one who calls it, so that when the corridor tells this story, and it will tell it, for 100 years, it remembers that Ashit Ralvayan was the owner wise enough to end a hunt, and not one of the fools who tried to save one. The old being opened the channel to the whole gallery. Because that, Pulis, is the only kind of certainty left worth owning. The certainty of having chosen, one time, the side of the thing that could not be stopped. Down in the amphitheater, Sable Vance stood in the settling dust beside the trapped and thrashing Warden, and waited, and did not know whether the next thing she felt would be a transit order or the collar closing on her throat, and she kept her face calm for her people and for the swarm, and she counted her own heartbeats down out of the red zone, 4 counts in and 7 counts out, and she thought about her mother, and about the man who had trained her mother, and about the 7 humans she'd seen in the holding block, 6 of whom were here now behind her, and one of whom, the girl of 12 with her mother's stillness, had not been among the 34, had been one of the ones the Warden took in the first days, before Sable understood, before Sable turned around, and she carried that and would carry it, and it was the price of having understood too late, and she did not let it show on her face because the story was not finished and the living were still watching. Then the collar spoke, and it was not the announcer's warm, oiled voice. It was old and dry and amused, and it spoke to all of them at once, the whole gallery and the whole field. "My name," the old voice said, "is HFY. I own the hunt. I have owned it for 60 years, and I built the Warden protocol, and I have watched 1,100 beings die on this stage, and I have never once been surprised until yesterday when a child laughed at my certainty and put it in the water." A pause. "The child has made me an offer. I am going to accept it. As of this moment, by the authority of the largest ownership stake, the hunt is concluded, not by a kill, by a withdrawal. The Warden is retired, undefeated and unbroken, at the height of its legend, extracted from a trap that no Warden was ever meant to face. The collars are being released as I speak. Transit is being logged for all 34 surviving quarry to a statute-protected port, witnessed on the record, irrevocable." The dry voice paused again, and when it came back there was something in it that had not been in it for a very long time, something almost like respect. "And to the girl, Sable Vance, you asked what a hunt is worth when the quarry stops being afraid. I have spent 60 years and a great fortune building the answer, and you have just given it to me for free, and the answer is nothing. It is worth nothing at all. Thank you for that. It is the only true thing anyone has ever shown me on this stage." The collar around Sable's throat clicked and went dead and fell off into the dust. For a moment, nobody moved. 34 ragged survivors in a bowl of pale stone, in the settling dust of a broken floor, beside a trapped legend, under 10,000 lenses, and they stood in the silence and did not quite believe it, because they had all learned over 5 days that the hunt did not end, that the spiral always closed, and the thing that was happening now was a thing the hunt was designed to make impossible, and impossible things take a moment to become real. Then Tim, the boy, 13 years old, reached up and pulled his own dead collar off his throat and threw it on the ground and stamped on it, and made a sound that was half a sob and half something else, and the something else was the thing that broke the spell, because it was a laugh. It was the same laugh. He had caught it from her. And then Roan was laughing, and Ithra, and the heavy gray pear, and the whole bowl filled with it, 34 voices of a dozen species who had spent 5 days being sold as terror. Laughing instead, and the acoustics that had been built to gather screams gathered the sound and threw it up the cliffs and out to the swarm and up 40 kilometers to a market that had, in the last 60 seconds, ceased entirely to exist. And 40,000 shareholders heard a whole hunt of quarry laughing, and understood that they had watched the end of the thing, the actual end, and that they had paid for the privilege. They came off the world 3 days later. It was not simple, and it was not clean, and it was not the end of the danger, because Sable had grown up knowing that safety was never a place you arrived at but a thing you rebuilt every morning, and she knew that some of the owners who had tried to kill her had not forgiven her for not dying, and that the corridor was wide and its cruelties were many, and a girl who had broken a hunt had made herself a name that some beings would want to erase. She knew all of that. But she also knew what Ralvayan had known, the thing the old being had said in its box before it accepted her offer, that the only permanent kind of safety the corridor understood was the kind where hurting you cost more than leaving you alone, and she had built exactly that, in front of 40,000 witnesses, on the most watched feed in the corridor's history. She had turned herself and 33 others from a resource into a legend, and legends were expensive to touch, and the market would price it accordingly, and the price would keep them safer than any statute. On the transit platform, waiting to board with Tim beside her and Roan and Ithra, and the heavy gray pair and the rest. 34 ragged survivors logged and witnessed and free. Sable Vance stood at a viewport and looked down at the world they had all been meant to die on. The Talwood green and gentle and dropping away below. A stage set that had been built to look like a Deathworld and had been given for 5 days. A real one to hold. And she thought about the girl of 12 she had not saved. And the 6 she had. And the 28 strangers who had learned, in a single desperate morning, the one thing her family had always known. "They're going to tell this story," Tim said beside her, watching the world shrink, "for a long time. About the girl who laughed." "Let them," Sable said, "but not that part. That part's not the story." She was quiet for a moment, watching the green world go. The laugh was never the thing. Anyone can laugh once if they're scared enough. The laugh was just what it looked like from the outside. She turned from the viewport and looked at the 33 faces that had decided with her how the story ended, and she smiled, small and tired and entirely unafraid. The stories that we turned around, that's all it ever is with us. They think the story's about being brave or being strong or laughing at the thing that's going to kill you. It isn't. The stories that we stopped running from the thing and turned around and went and got each other and made ourselves into something it couldn't hunt. The laughing's just how you know somebody's already turned around. The transit chime sounded, and the doors opened onto the ship that would carry them out. She picked up her single bag. "Come on. Let's go be somebody else's problem." And she walked onto the ship with her people behind her. 34 of the corridors unwanted who had been sold as certainty and had come off the world as legend. And the doors closed, and somewhere 40 kilometers down a broken floor lay open in a bowl of pale stone, where the great indifference of the corridor had already begun to close over what had happened there, even as the recording of it spread outward through the ring and the corridor and the markets, doing the work she had sent it to do. And the last thing any drone ever caught of the girl called Sable Vance was her back, walking away, into the crowd of the ones she had turned around to save, laughing at something one of them had said.